As someone who loves self-improvement, I'm here to tell you right now that self-help books are not that helpful. At least they weren't for me. When I first started this journey of self-improvement about 2 years ago, one of the first things I did was to start reading books again. And what better way to kill two birds with one stone of reading books and working on my self-improvement journey than reading self-help books. I've read many of the most popular ones that everybody recommends and talks about, but I've really just not found them as useful as I thought I would. Here are some of the things I realized while reading them. Number one, the info is not actually new. A lot of this info is repackaged information. So while how the book is presented is new, the material is actually very old and is pretty much the same for a majority of these books. One example of this would be if you read a book that just came out about Stoic principles. There is nothing new about Stoic principles that somebody could write about. They'll take information from the ancient writers such as Marcus Aurelius or Seneca, talk about it and then give their opinion about it, or they'll talk about how they implemented it or how you can implement it. So it's not like the information they're saying is brand new, something that's never been heard of before. Personally, I believe you could just read the source material and get much more value out of doing that than trying to read the third-party view of somebody else's opinions on the original material or somebody else's viewpoints on the original material. I think it's much better to read the original material yourself and make your own conclusions based on it. How I look at it is kind of like watching reaction videos on YouTube. Personally, I don't really find that much joy out of watching a reaction video, and if I am going to watch a reaction video, I would have wanted to see the original video first. I don't want to just watch a reaction video and then garner an opinion based on that reaction video, because these books that are taking things from the source material, they can't include every single thing that the original work says because that would be copyright infringement. So you're really not even getting a full picture of what's being said about the topic. I'd much rather just read the unfiltered full version of the source material and then come to my own conclusions rather than reading a third-party opinion on it. And this goes for many different topics within self-improvement and self-development. It can also be applicable for books about more productivity, more creativity, how to fix your life. All these things, they're really taking a lot of principles from things like philosophy, religion, things like that, and they're repackaging it. I feel like reading philosophy books are actually much more beneficial than reading self-help books. I feel like they provide a bigger picture. And one thing that I find really interesting about philosophy books is how a lot of the books are from like a long time ago. For example, Beyond Good and Evil or Either Or, both were written by philosophers in the mid to late 1800s. And it's pretty interesting because a lot of their works and a lot of their writings and a lot of things they talk about still hold true to today. So it means it holds the test of time. I find a lot of self-help books these days are very much time-centric. Like if you read a book that is a little bit older from, let's say, mid to early 2000s, I don't find that like a lot of things they say even are relevant to today's date. But I find that philosophy books, even though they were written a long time ago, there's still so much stuff that you can take away from it and it's still relevant to today's date. Another thing that I find that I don't really like about self-help books is how it's easy to consume the content, but it's hard to actually put into practice what they're saying. For me, there were so many times when I would read these books that I felt that I was just reading it but not actually putting into practice anything that was being said. One of the main reasons for this is because how easy it is to forget what you're even reading. When I'm reading, I try to be focused, but it's so easy to just not actually know what you're reading when you're reading self-help books. This is mainly because I don't think they're that interesting. When you're reading a storybook, there's a storyline, there's some character you're following, or there's some interesting story being told. With self-help books, it's not very much like that. It's very much, this is the problem, this is the solution, this is how you should do things, step 1, step 2, step 3. And those type of books are just honestly not that interesting. So it's easy to forget, and then you're not actually putting into practice anything that is being said. I find books that have stories are actually easier to remember and easier to take away things from. One example of this would be The Alchemist. Now, people think this is a self-help book, but it was really not written to be a self-help book. It was just a story. And a lot of people consider it a self-help book because of the story and what they take away from it. So I find that books such as that, which have a story and you can take away points from it and they can aid your self-improvement journey, are much better than just straight up self-help books that are supposed to have, point A, B, C, D, follow this, 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 and this. I find those books are actually harder to follow. Also, I find it hard to know when to stop when reading self-development, self-help books. Let's say I'm reading a book about time management, then I'm reading a book about goals, and then I'm reading a book about how to be more creative, how to manage my money, back to back to back. Am I really gaining anything? For me personally, when I was first starting, I would just read books back to back to back, and I started to realize that I was just reading them because they were self-development books and I wanted to check it off, and I wanted to feel like I was being productive. So would I say all self-improvement books are bad and that you should quit reading them altogether? I'd say you don't have to quit altogether. Let's say your two options are not reading any books, or you're gonna pick up and read a self-help, self-development book. I definitely recommend just reading the book, because that's better than doing nothing. You know, it's good to start somewhere. Everybody has to start somewhere. And I'm not saying all the self-help books are bad. For example, Atomic Habits by James Clear is actually a really good book. If you're gonna be someone who reads self-help books, I'd recommend a few things. Number one, don't read them back to back to back. I'd say expand your genres. You know, maybe you read one self-help book and then you read, you know, a few other different genres of books, and then you come back to another one, rather than reading them back to back to back. Another thing is, if you are gonna read them, I definitely recommend taking notes, because when I was reading them, I was not taking any notes, and I think that hurt me, because if you take notes, at least you're gonna try to, it's gonna like make a connection, and you can go back and actually get stuff from it. When you're reading stories books, you don't really have to take notes because it's a story. You're most likely gonna remember it. But if you're reading a self-help book, the point of it is to actually gain knowledge out of it and get something out of it. So I definitely recommend taking notes. That's something I didn't do, and I think could have aided my progress when I was reading these books. Nowadays, like I said, I read many different types of books. I very rarely go back to reading self-help books unless somebody personally recommends it to me. I found that diversity of reading different genres, different styles, and difference of opinions helps me learn more and helps me grow more as a person, and I'm gaining much more out of that than reading typical self-help books. Let me know in the comment section below if you've read self-help books, which ones you've liked, which ones you didn't like, and do you find that self-help books are still valuable in 2024? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, please drop a thumbs up. I appreciate you guys for watching. Until next time, I'm out. Peace.